Hello and welcome everybody. Today I have got a new world weapons tier list for you guys, and this is going to be a tier list for open world PvP. So we're going to be looking at these weapons through the lens of solo, small scale PvP, that sort of gameplay. Now keep in mind guys that this is my personal opinion on how the weapons rank up, and this is based on my experience throughout the last beta in PvP. I didn't get to use all the weapons in PvP, however, I did get to fight everything in PvP, so I'll do my best to give you guys the most accurate representation that I can of how good the weapons are. But before we get started, if you guys want a written version of this tier list, check out pvpnewworld.com. We also have all the weapon masteries on there, and I'm going to be adding a ton of content to the website over these next few weeks, so feel free to give that a look, and let's get right into it. So, starting off at the very bottom, we're going to be looking at the Musket. And my rankings were not very kind, unfortunately, to the Musket. It's a very powerful and accurate single-shot weapon with a longer reload time. This makes this weapon perfect for long-range combat, but unfortunately the longer reload times make it much less effective as your opponent begins to close that gap. And at a certain point, the rapid-fire capabilities of the other medium-ranged weapons eventually outperform the Musket's damage and accuracy. The Musket does, however, scale off of dexterity and intelligence, and this is great because it offers a lot of weapon options and build flexibility. And the Musket has some pretty powerful single-shot abilities. Shooter's Stance is a very powerful rapid burst shot, but it does root you when you use it. And then Powder Burn offers great upfront damage as well as one of the strongest burn dots in the game. But the Musket's biggest weakness is just the lack of close-range capabilities. It does have a great 10% haste uptime, but ultimately it needs to be paired with a close-ranged or speedy weapon, or even both to make up for its weaknesses. So for those reasons, I've given the Musket a B on the tier list. A B by no means is a terrible ranking, and I do like that because all of the weapons in this game felt viable in their own right. Next up, we've got good old Sword and Shield. The Sword and Shield has a faster short-range melee attack, and it has the strongest block in the game. This is kind of a good and a bad thing, because blocking can be very strong and mitigate all the damage you take. However, it has a lot of inherent risk, because if your opponent breaks your stamina while you're blocking, you do suffer a stun. And this basically just opens you up to take a lot of damage from your opponents. The big disadvantage of something like this is especially when you're outnumbered. Sword and Shield does have some really nice defensive passives in Sturdy Shield and Elemental Resistance, as well as getting that additional healing power from Recuperation is really nice. It also has access to a lot of Empower in its kit, which gives it a nice damage boost too. However, the big buff missing for Sword and Shield is Haste. They do get it from Critical Precision, but that is definitely more of an offensive passive and makes it difficult to escape with Haste on the Sword and Shield. Sword and Shield does have access to two pretty good stuns, as well as a really good defensive skill in Defiant Stance, which helps significantly reduce the damage you take for a period of time, giving you the ability to kind of even the odds when you're outnumbered. So I've given Sword and Shield a B on the tier list as well. The heavy reliance on block as well as the lack of speed definitely hurts Sword and Shield. That being said, it's still a powerful all-around weapon that can offer some good control, and if not heavily outnumbered, some great tanking capabilities. Next up on our list, we have got the Spear. The Spear has some of the best reach on its light and heavy attacks in the game. Its heavy attack in particular has a really long lunge distance. Mix this with all of the great control stun abilities that the Spear has, and the Spear becomes a really good melee distance fighter that allows you to control the battlefield quite well. The Spear also scales from dexterity and strength, giving it a lot of flexibility in the different builds and weapon combos that you want to use it with. The Spear abilities that really come to mind for me are Vault Kick, giving you a powerful stun and damage booster, the Sweep attack, which is going to give you another powerful stun followed up into a second attack combo, and then we've got the Javelin for a range stun on the Spear as well. Just like that, you can have all three of your Spear abilities stun your opponent, giving the Spear basically the longest and most powerful stun chain in the game. The big downfall of this Spear for open world PvP, just like so many weapons that are lower on this list, is the lack of speed. It does not have haste. On top of it, it only has access to one snare, and that's at the end of the light attack chain, which makes it very difficult to utilize that snare if you're trying to escape. I've given this Spear a B on the tier list. The lack of mobility is definitely a big downside, but having access to all of these really powerful, kind of more single target focused stuns gives the Spear really strong 1v1 and 1v2 capabilities. Next up, we've got the bow, and the bow is kind of your medium to long ranged weapon. It has some of the strongest heavy attacks for a ranged weapon and the guaranteed crits on headshots, as well as tons of haste and access to slow, making it a very mobile weapon, which is excellent for open world PvP. The bow definitely rewards someone with good aim and allows them to deal a ton of damage if they can land a lot of headshots, but with bad aim, you can have the opposite and find yourself dealing very lackluster damage. The bow has one of the most powerful and deadliest dots in the game with Poison Shot, and it's also an AoE dot too. It can deal a lot of burst damage with its ability Rapid Shot, and it has lots of powerful damage increasing passives that kind of just fit into the natural gameplay of bow that allow you to deal even more damage with your shots. The bow is a great medium to long range weapon, however it is much more difficult to aim than the musket due to the travel time of the arrow. So I've given the bow an A on the tier list. I think it has all the tools that it needs to be a very good all-around weapon, especially for solo PvP, but it has a very high requirement in the aim department. If you don't have a good shot, the bow is not going to be a good weapon for you, but if you do, it could be one of the best. The next weapon on the list is the Warhammer. This is a very slow but powerful two-handed weapon with really good CC. This weapon also deals a lot of damage to people's stamina if they try to block your attacks with it. Its individual abilities actually hit quite hard, and it has a lot of access to armor-piercing passives and active abilities. The Warhammer also gets a lot of access to grit, making your attacks uninterruptible, even giving you a passive that gives you grit on your heavy attacks. This is a big deal for making sure you can land your combos cleanly. The Warhammer does have access to some haste, and it also has access to snares. Pair that with lots of AoE staggers, snares, and AoE stuns, and the Warhammer actually has some pretty good mobility control. But because of how their buffs kind of work, it's a lot easier to attack with the Warhammer than it is to try to get away. For this list, I've given the Warhammer an A. I think it's a very powerful all-around weapon that doesn't really have any real glaring weaknesses. However, I do think the weapon shines a lot more in a group situation than it does small scale and solo, as all of the debilitating AoE effects it can spit out would definitely help your group in combat. Next up, we have got the Ice Gauntlet. Now this is a magical weapon that offers a lot of control and AoE and can even freeze your opponents. It can do a really good job camping the AoE fields that it lays down as well. Ice Gauntlet really stands out, I think, because of its more powerful abilities. Ice Shower is a very strong AoE route that prevents sprinting and dodging and is amazing for outnumbered control. Pair that with the Ice Storm, which is a massive AoE slow/damage, and you have a really stellar control combo that's effective even against multiple opponents. Another really powerful Ice Gauntlet skill is Entombed, and this allows you to basically stall inside of an ice field and rapidly restore mana. The Entomb field can be destroyed, but it's really good because you can just wait for cooldowns, restore your mana, and you purge all your negative effects as you break out of it. It essentially allows you to save or reset yourself if you get in a bad situation, which is really useful in PvP. So I've given the Ice Gauntlet a solid A on the tier list. It's got a lot of really powerful abilities and can put out quite a lot of damage while controlling the battlefield. And if you pair this guy with a speedy weapon, well, I think you have one of the strongest mana combos in the game. Next up on the list, we have got the Hatchet. Now this is a very fast melee weapon with rapid, light, and heavy attacks that you can easily gain a lot of 30% empower damage buffs with. The Hatchet also has easy access to haste and CC removal thanks to that Berserk skill, as well as tons of condition removal and access to Fortify, basically giving it really good buff coverage all around for dealing damage and staying alive. This weapon even has a passive that allows you to survive lethal damage for 3 seconds. Now I know that's on a longer 75-second cooldown, but the ability to survive a lethal hit when burst is the name of the game in PvP, that is an absolutely huge deal. The Hatchet also scales with strength and dexterity, which is really awesome for that build craft diversity because you get access to a lot of different weapon choices. And it is the only melee weapon that actually has a full ranged throwing kit attached to it. So for the tier list, I've given the Hatchet an A. I think it's all around a really good weapon. It has a lot of different build craft options that you can explore with it in the weapon itself and in the weapon combos. And it's just all around strong. That Berserk ability, absolutely amazing for PvP. Now, next up, I have got the Fire Staff. Now, the Fire Staff is a very powerful AoE and range damage weapon. It also has the ability to put a ton of dots and burns on your target. The Fire Staff also gets a passive to give it free heavy attacks, and it has an amazing mana management skill at the very end of one of its trees. The Fire Staff also boasts a 15% increased crit rate through its passives and 20% increased critical damage, and its crits can also proc burns, making it a very deadly critical weapon. But one of the best things that the Fire Staff has is its speed. It has one of the best gap closers in the game through Burnout, which allows you to travel a very long distance, and on top of it, you get a easy 10% haste whenever you use a Fire Staff skill, which is not hard to keep up almost 100% of the time. So for this tier list, I have given the Fire Staff an A. I think it is one of the most deadly medium weapons in the game. It's got a lot of really powerful burst abilities. On top of it, the dots it can apply are very deadly, and it is also one of the fastest weapons in the game too. Now, moving on to our next weapon here, we have got the Rapier. The Rapier is one of the fastest weapons in the game. Its speed is absolutely amazing. It has access to lots of haste, and it even has its own dodge ability in Evade, which allows you to chain a bunch of rolls back to back, giving you even more mobility. On top of it, it even has a gap closer for that speed too. The Rapier can also be built intelligence and dexterity, which again is awesome for that increased build variety. But let's talk a little bit more about that evade skill. The evade skill basically allows you to cancel any other ability or action that you're doing in the game with a dodge. This makes this one of the most high skill cap abilities in the game. You can use this ability offensively by attacking, then evading to cancel your attack at the last frame, and then attacking again, or you can use it defensively by doing a big roll dodge combo with your evade. Either way, you have a lot of flexibility with a very interesting skill like this. The Rapier definitely has some limited melee range though, because it is a smaller melee weapon. It doesn't have the reach that some of the two-handed weapons do. That being said, it has all the tools that you need to properly position yourself in a fight. So for this tier list, I have actually given the Rapier an S. In my opinion, I think it is one of the best weapons in the game because of how high the skill ceiling is with this weapon. This rapid, fast-paced weapon allows your abilities to really shine with things like perfect frame cancels on attacks and defense. Next up on our list, we have got the Great Axe. And the Great Axe is here because, well, it was definitely the meta during the beta. The Great Axe pumps out some pretty insane damage. All of its attacks deal quite a lot of damage, and its abilities deal a lot of damage too. On top of it, the Great Axe has really good crowd control and excellent offensive speed. Thanks to its final passive in its Reaper tree, the Great Axe can actually keep up with almost anything in the game if it's close enough to it, making this a perfect weapon for hunting people down, but not as great for running away. A lot of the Great Axe skills cancel nicely with the Great Axe heavy attacks, which do a lot of base damage, and on top of it, the light and heavy attacks on the Great Axe actually lunge you forward quite a bit, giving you a lot of range with the weapon when you use it. Great Axes also do a really good job breaking your opponent's block. Gravity Well comes to mind as one of the best Great Axe abilities, giving you a massive AoE control that just pulls everybody on top of a spot, and the only escape they really have is a gap closer. Great Axe itself also has the charge gap closing ability, which is one of the longest distance gap closers in the game, and on top of it, you get a ton of self-healing from a lot of different Great Axe abilities and passives while you're fighting. For this tier list, I have given the Great Axe an S. I think it is all around an excellent offensive weapon. Its attacks can be a little bit slower and easier to avoid than some other melee weapons, but when the Great Axe attacks do hit, they hit really hard, and they can do a really good job holding you in place so you can't avoid those attacks anyway. And finally, the last weapon on the tier list, and I hope at not too much surprise to everybody, is the Life Staff. Now, I chose the Life Staff here because it has insane amounts of healing power in solo and in a group. Life Staff can just straight up out-heal almost anything DPSing it one-on-one, while still doing damage to its target. Basically, the way the Life Staff is designed, almost everything that you do heals you, or gives you some sort of buff to the amount of healing that you do. This gives this weapon absolutely incredible group utility. Not only are you going to be good with it if you're by yourself, but you are going to greatly amplify the power of your group by making everybody in your group very hard to kill as long as you're healing them. The Life Staff even gets a boost to your health, and you get free light and heavy attacks with it, as well as easy access to Fortify. I mean, the Life Staff's got everything that you need to just tank out and heal. The only two downsides that I can really think of for Life Staff are the lack of mobility, as well as the fact that the weapon scales off of focus. Mobility is always huge for PvP, but the Life Staff really circumvents this weakness by having just insane amounts of healing power. And then the fact that it scales off of focus is kind of a downside, because there is only one weapon in the game that scales from focus, and that is the Life Staff. So if you decide to invest a lot into focus, you can actually weaken your abilities with your other weapon on your build. So a little bit of a drawback there, I think, but as the game matures, we'll see more weapons introduced that hopefully scale off of focus, and I think that won't be such a big issue for the staff. Either way, for the tier list, the Life Staff definitely earned that S rank, and I think out of all the S rank weapons that we've gone over, the Life Staff is generally the strongest for PvP. But I also think a huge part of that has to do with the fact that the healing from the Life Staff just feels like it might be too strong. Either way, this is the beta, and we might see some balance changes to the weapons once this game hits live. But as it sits right now, that Life Staff, absolutely amazing. So there you go, guys. That is the whole tier list. I really hope that you guys enjoyed it. I would love to hear what you guys think about the weapon balance in this game. Personally, I felt like no weapons were so weak that they weren't viable, and no one weapon was so strong that you had to use it or you wouldn't be successful. I think there is a bit of variance in power for sure, but I did like that the weapons at least felt kind of close to each other. If you guys are interested in some more written New World content, you can check out my website, pvpnewworld.com. We've got all the weapon masteries on there and more goodies to come as well. We also do the top 5 battles for ESO, and I'm hoping to do them for New World too. So if you guys have clips from either game that you want to send in for the top 5, you can send that to KristoferESO@hotmail.com. Check out my other website for ESO, KristoferESO.com, for all of your ESO needs. You guys can give me a follow on Twitch if you guys want to catch that live gameplay, and follow me on Twitter if you want to keep up to date with me. We are sponsored by What the Fast. They're a VPN for gamers, and they can give you better ping to your favorite games, free to try for the first month. A link down below for you guys. And then last but certainly not least, a massive thank you and shout out to all of my patrons on Patreon. Without you guys, I couldn't do this job, so thank you so much for helping support the show. Thank you everybody so much just for tuning in and watching today. I cannot wait for this game to come out. Seriously, I haven't had withdrawals from playing a beta like this ever, and it hurts my soul, but I am so looking forward to it. I hope you guys are also looking forward to New World's release. And as always, thank you for tuning in. Have a great night, everyone, and I'll see you next time.